I'm Keith Hilson with the Schmidt Music Trombone Shop, back with another daily practice tip for you. And today I'm going to talk about vibrato. What is vibrato? Vibrato is a way for us to color, to shape a note by rapidly changing it, either by quickly changing its pitch or by changing its timbre, its shape. Vibrato can play a number of different roles depending on what our instrument is and what the setting is. So for us in classical settings, we're talking about Western classical music, vibrato is a very, very common tool that we can use to either ornament, to color a note, or to help us to project. So for example, orchestral strings and vocalists use vibrato all the time because it does help them to color the notes, but it also lends projection to the note as well. And what they are doing is they are changing the pitch of the note rapidly back and forth. For us as wind players, very often we can be changing some of the pitch of the note, but just as often it's more about changing the timbre of the note as well. And in our case, it's not so much about projection, although there can be some of that, but a lot of it is about the color, the ornamentation, and it can add warmth and depth to the sound. So, how do we accomplish this? Different instruments accomplish this in different ways. There is a way that we can do vibrato with our diaphragm by quickly changing the air column that we're using, the airspeed, to cause these changes in pitch. But for us as brass players, the most common way that we create vibrato is with the jaw. So in other words, we're changing the shape of the jaw, more importantly, changing the shape of our mouth, our oral cavity, to change the sound. So for example, if we're thinking about a nice open O sound like this, we're going to alternate between O and ah. Oh, ah, oh, ah, oh, ah, oh, ah. So we have the open ah sound, ah, ooh, and then when we go to more of that ooh sound, we're using our jaw to change the shape of the oral cavity, ooh, ah, ooh, and we can hear that shift in the timbre. That's what we're going to do on our instrument as well. Now, before we get started, a couple of notes. First off, in order for us to have real control over this vibrato, we have to have a pretty solid sound in the first place. We have to be quite a ways down in developing our sound and be able, in particular, to maintain the pitch of the sound, to have that really a focused, centered, stable sound. If that's not really happening, all the vibrato is going to do is A, make it sound less secure, and B, more importantly, it's going to make it more difficult for us to keep everything locked in. That leads to my second point, which is that vibrato is an ornamentation. This is something that we add to an already great picture product to make it sparkle just a little bit. I always use the analogy of a Christmas tree. We want our playing without vibrato or other ornamentations. It can be trills, it can be turns, grace notes, gruppettos, etc. We want our product, our music, before that, to shine. We want it to be a beautiful Christmas tree. It's a great looking tree. It actually has ornaments and lights and everything on it. All this ornamentation is like little sprinkles of tinsel on top. It just gives it that extra little pop, that sparkle. But if the tree doesn't look good to start off with, all the tinsel in the world is not going to save it. So all of this ornamentation, like vibrato, is just that tiny little tip of the iceberg to make everything just sparkle a little bit more, but we have to have the support, the foundation underneath all of that. Secondly, with the vibrato as well, this is something that for us as especially brass players, we're going to use primarily in solo settings. We really never use vibrato in large ensemble or chamber ensemble settings. I mean, there are exceptions there. There are certain exceptions in classical music. There are exceptions in other styles of music as well. So for example, in the big band music of the 1920s and 30s and 40s, you heard a lot of vibrato used there, but that's a whole different conversation. For us in our classical settings, this vibrato is typically more reserved for solo settings. So I would not use this in your concert band, in your orchestra typically, but in certain settings and in all of the solo work that you are doing, this is really something for us to think about. So how do we work on this jaw vibrato? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to apply that same syllable concept that we were thinking about, the ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, and we're going to put that into play with the instrument. So what I'm going to do is grab my handy dandy metronome, and I'm going to set it to 60 beats per minute. And I'm going to start working on the syllable change, moving the jaw from ah, ooh, ah, between that in tempo. Just like so much other things that we do in developing our skill and our technique and our control, we need to start slow. If we start just diving in and trying to do this really, really quickly, A, we're probably not going to have a really great sound because we haven't learned how to create the best sound with it, and B, we're not going to have control over it. We want this, again, to be an ornamentation. We want it to color what we're doing, and we want to be able to control it versus the vibrato just happening on its own here. So I've got my pulse set to 60 beats per minute, and I'm just going to play quarter notes. I'm just going to sustain a single note, like F here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate on quarter notes between ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, like that. And I'm going to go like that. And I'm thinking about, again, the stability of the sound, supporting with the air, right? It's always about the air. And now I'm going to start adding subdivisions. So I'm going to start getting a little bit faster, maintaining the same underlying pulse, but always thinking about that sound in that control with the air. So we're going to go from quarter notes to eighth notes. And try and keep everything nice and stable here, just moving the jaw and thinking about those differences in syllables, right? And we can go from eighth notes to triplet eighth notes. And then we can go to 16th notes. And then we can go to triplet 16th notes. And you can hear at that point, now we're actually starting to get into what could be a usable vibrato there. And then, of course, we can keep getting it, making it faster from there. But the underlying idea is starting off slow and making sure that we still have a great sound the whole time. If we're going to that ooh sound and it's, if it's tight and if it's not centered and it just doesn't sound good, well, then we're not accomplishing anything. I'm still thinking through my sound all the way there, and we're just changing that timbre. Again, it's not so much even thinking about changing the sound and what I'm doing here to a point. What I'm really aiming for once I'm comfortable with it is the color I'm trying to add to the sound. But this process is one way that we can work on that. And again, I highly encourage you to make sure that you have your sound stable and secure, you're comfortable with your airflow before you start applying this here. Because again, we don't want this to affect all these other great things you have going on with your sound. This is just a little addition on top that can add just a little bit extra. So I hope you enjoyed this video about vibrato. If you have other topics you would like us to cover, please feel free to leave those in the comments or send us a note at tromboneshop@schmidtmusic.com. Let us know what you would like to see, and please check out the other videos from our daily practice tips as well. So happy practicing, and please keep making music.